I'm Engineer Gabriel Ntak. I'll be talking on fundamentals of plumbing operations, focusing mainly on health and safety precautions. Health and safety precautions to observe when performing basic plumbing operations. And our learning objectives today is, on completion of this session, trainees will be able to observe health and safety procedures while carrying out basic plumbing practical applications without supervisions. So how are we going to achieve this? First of all, for us to be able to achieve our learning objectives, first, you should be able to understand the importance of safety, and then describe the safety precautions to observe when working. And finally, you should be able to know the basic requirements of personal protective equipment, because without the personal protective equipment, I believe at the end of the day, one thing or the other may happen. So, coming to the importance of safety, one, accidents, they do not just occur like that. They are caused either by unsafe act or unsafe conditions. An accident in the workplace can be avoided. How do we avoid the accidents in the workplace? It can only be reduced to some certain extent. So to reduce accident, safe attitude must be instilled in everyone's. Therefore, the safe attitudes in the workplace includes: one, identifying the safety hazard. Any environment you find yourself, any workstation you find yourself, first you must try to identify the safety hazards within that environment. After identifying the safety hazard, the next thing for you is to assess the risks involved in that hazard. If you are able to identify or assess that risk involved in the hazard, the next thing is for you is to take appropriate precautions and finally adopt to the safety measures before you start any work. So, knowing the hazards and how to protect yourself is the key to your safety. Therefore, wherever you find yourself, if you are working and you are in doubt of anything, you need to consult your supervisor. Therefore, as I said earlier, you have to identify the hazards. So there are so many hazards that we have. Mainly the types of hazards are electrical hazards, fall from height, fire, housekeeping, and then tool handling. Those are the safety hazards that we have. And the hazards associated with our job, that is a plumbing job, mainly fall from height. That is especially when walking or standing. If you are standing or walking on a ladder, there is a tendency that anything can happen and you can fall. So it's a hazard. Slip, trip, and fall is another hazard associated with this job. While carrying, in the event of carrying a heavy or bulky load, there is tendency that you can slip, trip, and then you fall. So these are hazards. Also, maybe if you want to cut a pipe, there is tendency that the cutting tool, or whether it depends on the kind of cutting tool you are using, whether hacksaw, pipe cutter, and there is tendency that you can injure yourself by maybe a kind of like you cut and have injuries that is by sharp instrument and the tools. There are so many hazards related or associated with this job. Repetitive strain injury is another hazard. That is a kind of like during lifting and moving of heavy loads, working in awkward, bend and postures. These are some of the hazards related to our work or plumbing job. So exposure to cold and or heat stress as a result of rapid movement between cold and hot areas. exposure to ultraviolet radiation during welding operations, because if you are a plumber, there is a tendency that you find yourself a kind of like when you try to join the pipe, most especially when it comes to galvanized iron pipe, and you want to join, there is a tendency that maybe if the fittings, if you are not going to use fittings, you can weld. So in that aspect, then a kind of like exposure to radiation will now take place. So these are some of the hazards related to our job. So when it comes to that, I said you should be able to do what? Assess the risks involved. So how do you assess the risks? There are steps in which you assess the risks. But before we comes to that steps, we have to kind of like define what is risk assessment. And risk assessment is simply a careful examination of what in your work could cause harm to you or to people, so that you can weigh up whether you have taken enough precautions or should do more to prevent harm. That is risk assessment. Workers and others have a right to be protected from harm caused by failure to take reasonable control measures. That is what risk assessment is all about. So the steps on how to assess the risks in your workplace, number one step is identify the hazard, as I said earlier. Then the two, you decide who may be harmed and how. How could that hazard harm that particular person? So you should be able to evaluate the risks and decide on the precautions. What precautionary measures are you going to take? After that, then you should record your findings and implement them. And then finally, you review your assessment and update if necessary. So for that, we must have the reason for observing safety. So a need for accident prevention in all industrial establishments, as I said earlier, accidents are caused by what? Unsafe or by unsafe condition. So reasons for observing safety, as I said earlier, there is a need for accident prevention in all industrial establishments. And I said earlier that accidents are caused by either unsafe act or unsafe condition. Therefore, workplace should be checked for unsafe conditions for work to be carried out. What is dangerous about this job? Plumbers working in sewage systems may severely hurt and even kill by releasing toxic gases and by the deficiency of oxygen. So safety precautions when it comes to fire hazard, there are issues or main causes of fire incident at workplaces. Therefore, means of dictating and giving warning, a fire protection system need to be put in place. Then routes, that is escape routes, are clearly noticeable. They should not be obstructed. These are some of the precautionary measures that you need to take when it comes to the issue of electrical. Then safety precautions as a regard of falling from height. You always inspect ladder before climbing. Never climb a shaky ladder. And make sure any ladder that you are going to use, always maintain a 3-point contact. And you should extend your ladder at least 1 meter, that is to the platform it leads to. That is when it comes to issue of ladder. So after that, I told you, you need to know the requirements of your personal protective equipment, which is the PPE. So PPE is defined as the equipment and clothing worn by person at work for protection against one or more risks to health or safety. All that entails in PPE includes overall. It depends on the hazard, the nature of hazard. So overall, which is the protective clothing that you need to wear or put on during work. Next is your helmet. You need hard helmet, most especially if you are working under suspended load. That is, the hard helmet will be able to prevent any falling objects that may kind of hit and strike your head. So you need it. Next is safety boots. You need safety boots to protect your foot. And you need safety goggles. When it comes to maybe welding, or if you are working in a place that flying debris, or working in a place that you could encounter flying debris, you need safety goggles to protect your eyes. You also need your hand gloves. You need hand gloves to protect your hands. As I said, safety first and safety always. Always remember to put on your personal protective equipment. Details about this course, you can kindly log into our platform for more details on the safety aspect of the fundamentals of plumbing operation. I still remain Engineer Gabriel Tak. Thank you very much.